Afternoon, everyone. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. This gallivanting up and down the West Coast makes it sound quite glamorous. I guess it kind of is a little bit. So I'm here this afternoon to talk about how we do innovation, and talks about a balancing act. And I guess just to explain what I mean by this, and any of you guys involved in innovation will, I suspect, recognise some of this. I think, and it was really interesting in the panel discussion earlier on to hear about some of the challenges, and I can sit there and nod about a lot of what was said. But balance when you're talking about innovation is really important, because ultimately you need to take a business on a journey with you, and that term is slightly overused and makes you sound a bit X-factory, but it is true. You need to get a balance between short-term and long-term. You need to get a balance between pull and push. And what I'll do is just explain to you how at Nationwide we're approaching this. And to help narrate this story, I'm going to give you a little demo. So this is where we all need to pray to the gods of live demos and hope that this works. So I guess before I give the demo, just to give a little bit of context, what I'm about to show you went live out to a small subset of the great British public yesterday. This is working software, and what we are doing, and this is an alpha, so any of you familiar with Eric Ries, Lean, etc., we have taken a large chunk out of that book, and we're really experimenting with the idea of alphas, experiments, to try and prove out benefits cases, facing into some of the challenges around legacy and how do you make change happen. This is our current approach. So Nationwide Chat, what we have created is a piece of working software that allows me as a customer to interact with somebody in our branch network. This allows me to undertake banking services. We could expand out to different types of services. The person I'm talking to is going to be a guy called Jordan. He's a real person. He exists over in a branch in Threadneedle Street. We've got about 15 or so Jordans dotted around London. We'll go out to around about 100 customers initially, and then we'll expand that out. And what's really interesting, the purpose of this is not to test the technology. The technology stack we've created is disposable. It didn't cost a huge amount of money. It didn't take a huge amount of time. It's a bunch of standard components that we've plumbed together. What we're really doing here is testing a proposition. If it works, we will scale it. If it doesn't, we will either refine it or we will kill it. But I think it's a useful way for me then to narrate how we are going about innovation and how we then get the pull through into the wider business. So at that point, if we can cut across to the demo. Okay. Good, the IT help desk is here. No? Okay. This worked beautifully earlier. Aha. Okay, so this is my phone. This is where I hope my wife doesn't call me or any of my embarrassing mates text me. Or you, Daryl, for that matter. So this is an app. We've deployed it as something separate right now. Again, this is an alpha software experiment. So I'll go in. So first thing to notice is it is secure. So at this point here, and I've already been through an enrollment journey, I've already onboarded, and I can then enter into a chat. So I can say, hi, and with any luck, Jordan will be there at the other end responding. Now, some of you will be looking at this and kind of going, well, you know, they've recreated WhatsApp. What's interesting about that? So I guess I'll explain. I'll try not to multitask because I'll just screw it up. So when is my So I can engage with Jordan as if I was in a branch. If you think about what this means and think about some of the challenges that banks face, so we have got 700 branches dotted around the UK. they are staffed with years and years of experience. And in terms of what customers want, they absolutely want the convenience of digital, but also people are, we're a social species, and there are times when, I'll come back to that story, there are times when we actually want to talk to another individual. How can we do that? Well, I guess we have a contention that technology will allow us to connect humans with other humans in different ways. And this is us starting to play with some of those ideas. So what Jordan has done here, so I've asked a question that involves some security. So he's going to go through an ID&V process with me now to authenticate me. So I'm going to go into this widget. That's not true, by the way. Right, this is... Oh. Right, you're going to have to help me here. There we go. What was it? 1, 2, 3, bracket, question mark. Hey, there we go. Look at this, audience participation at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. So, what I've gone here then is I've gone through, and Jordan has then used our existing CRM systems to go back, verify who I am, and he knows that James is James, and at this point, he can then do banking, and it's as if he was in front of me. What's lovely about this is that we have to do no integration here. This is Alt-Tab integration going on here. So in terms of how we roll this out, how we can deploy this, it's relatively straightforward. So a lot of the challenges that we often face into with the plumbing, we have done away with for the purposes of this experiment. So let us talk about something else. Thanks. E-try. Ooh. So there are certain interactions we do where we might want something a little bit more than just text. Text works actually really well. In the experiments we've done to date, people use text an awful lot of the time. But imagine you had something slightly more complex, so you were going through a mortgage application, you want to do some kind of complex change of address, something like that, then you might want some different type of interaction. So here's where we'll try the bit that may well fail. So Jordan, as ever. Right, I'll try one more time, and if not, I'll give up on this bit. Okay, not to worry. So, video works. I'm blaming the Wi-Fi here rather than the software. If we can cut back to presentation, please. So, why do I show you that? Well, as I say, I think the cynics in you could kind of go, it's not that interesting. They've created WhatsApp and something that looks a bit like FaceTime that doesn't work desperately well. And yes, we have created that. I think, though, because you're a room full of enlightened people talking about innovation, we'll have no cynics out there. And what you will then realize is that we have created that, but what we've also created is an infrastructure that makes that work. So really practically, at the other end, Jordan has got an inside dashboard that allows him to manage me and all of the other clients. We've developed a kind of extensible architecture that allows us to drop other widgets in there. The security widget is one. We could drop a appointment management widget or a mortgage calculator widget. So we can use this framework to try different things and see what works. But what we've also done is we've had to engage with every single control community out there and create a way that allows us to drop this capability in and do it in a way that is compliant and we've managed the risk. And this whole discussion around failure I think is really interesting. It gets a bit circular. Is failure an option? Well, I don't know, as an industry, we've not covered ourselves in glory, and the reason why the risk frameworks are the way they are is because we screwed it up in the past royally, and I get why things are the way they are. what I think we can do is do things that minimize that risk or allow you to put other controls around so that you can do experiments, but take the learnings and then use that to inform products in a way that is faster, cheaper, quicker, and more relevant for today's life. So I think hopefully that kind of gives you an indication of what this is about. And I guess what I wanted to introduce, I use that as a hook back through the rest of this presentation to explain how we do innovation. So, innovation at Nationwide. For those of you that don't know, Nationwide's been around for a wee while, 150 years or so. We have kept innovation throughout that time because otherwise we wouldn't exist. Any organisation that's been around for a good long period of time has kept innovating because people's needs change, okay? We have done a number of interesting innovations. Some things have gone well, some things have not gone quite so well. We were early on kiosks. When I first started work back in the mid-90s, actually Nationwide was heralded as a bit of a forward thinker, and we went large on kiosks. There were some nods out there. You know what? It was quite smart. The technology wasn't ready and people weren't ready, and we gradually withdrew those. You look at it now and it's kind of laughable, but at the time it was really quite forward thinking. We've had some better successes. So we launched something called Nationwide Now in 2013. So this is a service we've got rolled out to about 450 branches around the UK, and it allows remote advice to be given. So we've got teams held centrally and teams dotted around the country, and you can walk into a branch, sit down and have a high definition interaction with multiple screens and printers and what have you, and get advice remotely. We now do about 20% of our business through that means. How did we make that work? Well, we tried it small, we refined the proposition, we understood what makes it work, so technically but also from the customer interaction perspective before we scaled it. And I guess what I was then doing when thinking about today was then trying to distill what is it about the things that we have done where they've worked well and not well. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, right? So Nationwide Now, why was it such a success? Well, about 6 months before we started rolling this out, we made a change to our rewards in the network. So we took away sales-based rewards. We did that because it was the right thing to do, because we're a mutual and we're not driven by sales. What it meant, though, was that when we put something into a branch, the branch didn't see that as a competitor that was taking away volume from their shop and would impact their bonus, so they engaged with it in a different way, which meant that it drove success. That was good luck, it was circumstance, but they are, I think, indicative of sometimes you've got to take the luck when you can get it. But when you then really distill what it is, I think there are 4 things that I could really identify as being the reasons why innovations do or don't work. And I guess before I start, this is a little story. This was a picture from the 1990 edition of Which magazine, and it talks about touch tone, which was a way for, if you had an old-fashioned phone that had one of those, that you could use telephone banking, which was the latest thing back in 1990. And this entire story is about this lady, Mrs. W, who's pregnant, and due to some side effect of pregnancy, she's got poor circulation and numbness in the fingers, and she couldn't use the touch tone device and therefore couldn't get access to telephone banking. And I thought it was a really interesting way of narrating the fact that this is not new, we've been doing this for a long time, but also to the first point there, that customer focus is absolutely central to success of any kind of innovation. If I think back to the Nationwide Chat example, when we first started that experiment, so that the first versions of what I just showed you, we did literally use WhatsApp. We went out and recruited customers using various means, we explained what we were doing, and then we used WhatsApp to have a conversation with them, understand what the proposition was before we refine that and bake that into the software. And I think that, if I look back at the things that have gone well, that's the central thing that we've done the best, and where it's gone wrong, where we haven't. The next thing is delivery to live. One of the most frustrating things I experienced, I think, running the innovation function was whole bunch of really good ideas that just hit this, what we call the innovation air gap. They're screamingly good, but because they're not on someone's radar, or putting them live through the standard route is just a bit too hard, they sit there and don't go anywhere. And yeah, there is no magic bullet to this. The fact that we've got complex legacy systems, the fact that we've got a delivery schedule that's stacked up with regulatory change, that isn't ever going to change. How do we try to get through that? I think there's a combination of trying to architect your way out of it, make sure that you are putting in place the building blocks like a colleague from Nordea was talking about there, so that you have got a system that is extensible, but then also using things like the experiments we've created to create a business case that is so compelling that it forces its way to the top of the agenda. As I say, no silver bullet, but that is how we are trying to go about it. Business buy-in. Business buy-in is a really interesting one. We set up a innovation function a couple of years ago, and somebody was talking about the side of the desk risk of innovation earlier on, and I agree. I think there's a real risk when you try to do innovation side of the desk that it can just too often get nudged out of the way and doesn't feature high enough up the organization's to-do list. Conversely, when you create a dedicated innovation function, there's also a risk of the kind of ivory tower risk kicking in, where people are slightly sniffy about it. There's this kind of sense of otherness is created and people cannot engage with it. And this is where we talk about push versus pull innovation within our team. Push is where we as an innovation function will have interactions with organizations, generate new ideas, and try and push into the business and stimulate ideas, stimulate discussions. And pull is where we engage and we almost undertake assignments on behalf of the business. And when we're looking at the work that we've got on the stack at any given time, we try to make sure that we have the right balance of push and pull to ensure that we've got the level of business buy-in to the overall endeavour. Otherwise, the risk of skewing one way or another is too great. And then the final thing then is long-term, short-term. The easiest innovations to get away are short-term. They're simple little things that you can get some real mileage on quite quickly. They give you some wins. They give you an ability to say, what a great job we're doing as an innovation function. The risk then is that you end up becoming kind of a glorified dev shop, putting little incremental innovations into existing things, and it's not actually taking the business forward. The flip side is that you'll sit there, you'll create some interesting thought leadership and PowerPoint on blockchain and how it's going to change the world, or whatever it happens to be, but they're always 5 years out, and you end up becoming kind of ivory tower PowerPoint merchants that have got interesting ideas but don't actually translate into business value. And again, neither one is right or wrong. I think it is about balance. In terms of how we try to get around that risk, again, it comes back to the customer. We've created these things. These are not technology specific. These are what we see as being the big macro trends, things that are societal, they're economic, they're things that customers are thinking about, they are concerned about, and they are things that we use to both stimulate new ideas, but we also use it to verify things as well, to make sure that we're not overly skewing towards something that we think is kind of cool or interesting. I think we live in a really interesting time. So we've got stats, whatever, 80% of people have got a smartphone. So you can immediately infer from that 80% of people are really... That was Mrs. Smith. It was. That 80% of people are technically literate, or 80% of people understand finance. And other research we've done says that 1 in 3 people can't add 2% on to £100 of deposit in terms of working out what interest they'll get. Or we've got 30% of people who will have less than £500 of savings tucked away for a rainy day. So that would be broken washing machine, clutch in the car has gone, real problems facing real people. And I think then it's against that context that we need to make sure that whatever innovations we create as a building society are firmly grounded in what our customers needs. And for Nationwide, we operate in the middle 80%. We don't have a wealth management top 10% proposition. We're there for everyday people with everyday needs. So dealing with how to register the death of a loved one or power of attorney, the things that people need to deal with that are complex, emotional, is where we as a business need to focus our innovations to make sure that we are consistently adding value to our customers. So what does that mean for how we do innovation, so to speak? This is the picture that I have in my mind, and I guess this is then the final part of the Nationwide Chat story. So I've talked about how we try and engage members in this, colleagues, and the wider market with fintechs. The other one is partners, and I think my colleague from RBS earlier on was talking about partnerships and collaboration being key. So the Nationwide Chat proposition we have developed in conjunction with an organisation called Pivotus. So the glamorous West Coast trips that we mentioned earlier on, so one of the outcomes from that is that we partnered with an organisation called Pivotus about a year ago. So Pivotus are a wholly owned subsidiary of Umpqua Bank. Umpqua are a kind of mid-sized West Coast bank, renowned for being quite innovative, and they took a decision about 18 months ago. Rather than try and do an in-house innovation proposition, they spun up a separate company. They put it in Silicon Valley rather than in Portland. And part of the strategy of that company was to partner with organizations around the world to develop new propositions, to bring in ideas and perspectives to create new ways of doing financial services. And it has been a very interesting journey for us in terms of really understanding what it takes to partner effectively. And I guess just in the interests of time, my key reflections are up there. The thing that I think that the last year has really taught me, especially when it comes down to that collaboration point, it's really it's really easy to be seduced into engaging in lots of collaborations. It's very easy to go out and have lots of conversations with lots of people that are all interesting, but making sure that the investments that you make are really centered around what your customers need, making sure that you're mindful of the wider stakeholder environment, that you are giving some demonstration of value, working out how you can pull those innovations through the pipeline and deliver them to live is absolutely paramount when you're working through this. That is me. I'm bang on time.
But in time for at least a couple of questions, I think. So.
Hi.
The partnership that you have with the West Coast Bank in Silicon Valley, how's IP work in terms of that partnership? How do you guys cooperate, share IP, share ideas?
Yeah, so when we went into the collaboration, we didn't even know what it was that we were going to create. We had to go in with the right attitude that we could co-create that, whatever it was that we were going to create. As part of the initial engagement, we then agreed to be able to use the IP in perpetuity, but there is the ownership of it resides with that organisation. Okay, that's me. Thank you all.
One more.
Oh.
Hello, Corinne Ferrari from Citi. So one question, looking at the digital innovation and how customers are responding to all the online interaction, I'm still wondering, however, how we can look at that in wealth management environment where it's still based on advisory transactions, building trust and credibility with the customer. So how are your views on moving those type of high net worth customers to the digital transformation and innovation?
Okay, so from a nationwide perspective, we don't have any dedicated wealth management proposition, so it's not a question that I faced into. However, what I would say though is we still have, so the picture that our colleague from Nordea was showing around branch transactions, the picture for us doesn't look like that. We still have a large proportion of our customer base that go in and use the branch network. Why is that? Well, because relationships matter for these people. I absolutely think that technology has a role to reframe what relationship means, and what it will allow us to do is really start to explore some of the concepts of virtualizing that workforce. So yeah, for me to have a relationship with somebody in a branch, could be my local branch, it could be a branch elsewhere, but I can actually form a meaningful relationship with a human, I think is how we start to reframe that concept of relationship in a digital age. And then how we can then use technology to, using the insight from the data, then prompt interesting conversations. So it's not that technology is replacing that interaction, but technology is there to provide useful insights and value-adding services, then starts to become very interesting space.
That whole concept of enabling intelligent conversations interactively once you've authenticated someone, I mean, it doesn't really matter what vector you're in or what part of the business you're in, you still need to be able to have that and also be client-centric. So for me, that was the killer in terms of what you guys are doing.
Yes, I hope so.
Great, James. Thank you very much indeed.